Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions. Today's opinions will be about Good Morning, Darling by Azalea Crowley. This is the first of the Darling Disposition series, and I do not understand what the hell is going on in my brain right now. I don't read romance. I very rarely read horror, and this book is both, and I absolutely loved it. It turned me into mush. I was putty in the book's hands. And I only bought this book because I have a great love of reading books that I know absolutely nothing about except for, vaguely vibes. Usually I want to know vaguely what genre it's in, and that's enough for me. And this one was recommended to me on Threads, and I literally looked at it just enough to see the word monster and secrets, and I was like, okay, so cool, like a mystery novel with some monsters. I could get into that. And then I bought it, and I just started reading it and looked at the content warning page and went, oh no, I have a monster romance in my hands. And I decided to read it anyway because, might as well give it a chance. And I am so glad that I did. If I had looked into this book beforehand and really found out what genre it was, I never would have picked it up, and I would have missed a book that I absolutely loved. So Good Morning, Darling follows two leads. Ella Bardot is a 27-year-old autistic daughter of a family that owns a very successful funeral home in Seattle. She's moved back home because she wasn't making enough money as a teaching assistant and is hoping to take this opportunity to sort of forge a better relationship with her father. The problem is, she's terrified of death and anything related to death, and he's a funeral home director. And also, he doesn't seem that excited about inviting her into his confidences. Then she runs into our other lead, Eugene. Now, Eugene is someone she remembers as the handsome employee that she had a bit of a crush on before she moved away, 6 years ago. But what she doesn't know is Eugene, with his mid-Atlantic accent, his wildly out-of-date slang, his too-wide smile, and his aggressive teasing, is actually being nice to her for ulterior motives. He has a plan to get out from under the Bardot family's control, and Ella might be the exact pawn he needs to do it. When Eugene saves Ella from a violent attack, she's going to have to face the fact that her normal, shiny facade of a life is just that. It's a facade. There's a lot more going on behind that she doesn't know about, and some of these shadows might be a lot darker than she ever would have guessed. And that sounds really dark and brooding, doesn't it? It's not just me. That sounds like it's going to be a tense, atmospheric, possibly, still sounds a bit like a murder mystery or a monster mystery. It sounds like it's going to end poorly for one or both of the leads. It sounds like, a lot more horror than romance. And yeah, the cover very clearly says romance, and I just didn't read the signals. And I cannot stress to you enough that this book is one of the cutest, sweetest, and most gleeful things I have ever read in my life. Is there violence? Absolutely. Is there death? Yup, a good bit of it. Is there high stakes and looming threats around every corner? Oh god, yeah. Was my main experience with this book giggling and squeeing like a schoolgirl, laughing out loud, and reading as quickly as humanly possible because I just wanted to see the two leads have a happy time together? Yeah! And I do not understand how I could be so invested in this monster getting the girl. But the balance of it is so absolutely perfectly done, for me at least. And what I tend to dislike about romance novels is I end up feeling like nothing is happening, even when a lot is happening. Because so much of the plot always revolves around the will they, won't they. And I know it's part of the selling feature that everyone knows going into it, that they will, that they're gonna end up happy together. But for me, that does remove a bit of the tension. And I understand, for romance readers, it doesn't. But that's why I'm not a romance reader. But for me, this book had the exact right mix of other plot elements to draw me in and to allow me to enjoy the romance without getting distracted by, thoughts of, yeah, I already know they're gonna get together. And this book does have romance in spade. I'm not lying here. This is a romance novel. That is the core plot. But there's also the mystery of Ella trying to figure out what her family's business actually is. There's Eugene's quest to be free. There's Ella's struggle to put herself forward when she's always feeling out of step with the world around her. There's the action-adventure of these two trying to avoid the violent assassins that are chasing them. And you could cut the romance entirely from this book and still have a book. but I wouldn't want you to, because I absolutely just love the romance elements of it, which is not the way I usually experience books. And it hits so many of the points that I do love in a romantic subplot. And there's just a lot more of it than a subplot. Like, I absolutely love characters who are chock-a-block full of trauma and self-hatred, who can't see the light in themselves, but can see the glory in the broken person across from them, and that's in this book. The characters who have never really experienced the whole sexual attraction thing, but meets this one perfect person, and they fall so hard it almost breaks them. Yeah, that's in this book, and it's like candy to me. Oh, and add in the desperate attempt to be open and honest and super communicative, but put in really serious obstacles. Like, oh my god, yeah, I'm here for it. Because, like, I don't usually like miscommunication as a trope. It really annoys me. And not because it's illogical, because it's too logical. It's too much like real life. But here, there was just enough going on that it felt like they were really actively trying to get past it. They were taking steps, and it felt right and strong and cool. And it felt like it was done in a way that I don't usually see it done. And maybe that's because I don't read enough romance novels. Maybe it's done this way in a lot of them. But for romantic subplots, when miscommunication comes up, there's not usually this much reason for it. And there's also, like, you know, a shadow monster, which just makes me ecstatic. And I did say, I was like, it's a monster romance. It's not a monster romance, as in our lead does not end up, you know, sleeping with a giant 8-foot-tall being with 15 legs or anything like that. But our male main character, yeah, he is a bit of a monster. And I really like the monsters that we have in this book. Like, I feel like there's a really good mix of classic, like, horror trope monsters, mixed in with paranormal trope monsters, mixed in with, like, folklore, and original world building. And our female main character is half Filipino, and there are a few bits of, like, Filipino folklore slipped in here and there, which is cool, because I don't know that much about it. I really liked how some of the magic and the monsters were used to examine consent in particular, and how being forced to do things can mess with a person. And, like, bewitching a human being is honestly something a lot of book monsters, and specifically vampires, can almost always do this in paranormals or urban fantasy. But there was something about the way that this book handled it that felt a lot more thoughtful and meaningful than a lot of the others I've read. And, like, it felt like it was working with within the themes of masking, and how masking sort of forces people to just go along with things that the neurotypical people around them define as normal. And it was just really cleverly done. Like, I really liked how the more, like, genre-y tropes really fit in with the themes that were deeper, and, like, I love it when a book does that. And I loved the description of the shadow monster. Like, the shadow is creepy, but also subtly cartoony, which is absolutely exactly what I need to be allowed to have an emotional connection that the book was calling for us to have with this, you know, monster. And we saw just enough of Eugene being monstrous that it really works as horror. It gives that dangerous feeling. It gives a depth to the, you know, like, violence going on. And also, it gives a touch of reality and veracity to a lot of the lines he has about being monstrous, and how he cannot have feelings and stuff like that. Because a lot of times when I read stuff like that, it reads like a 14-year-old edgelord being like, meh, I'm too monstrous for anyone to love. But it really works in this book because we see how monstrous he is. And it was, for me, a really great introductory monster romance lead. Now, that being said, I will say that this is one of the few places I do have some negative things to say. This book is the first in a series. At least a duology. I don't know how long this series is going to end up being, because it just says book 1 on it. But I do know from a little excerpt in the back that this is set in the same world as the author has another series. And I wonder if that's why I was craving a little bit more exposition for a good chunk of the book. Like, I was given just enough to know that Eugene had something going on, and that a shadow was involved, and that he was around back in the 1920s, but there was very little other hints as to what exactly he was for a huge chunk of the book. And for a while, yeah, it very much felt like the author just wanted us to remain in suspense and try to figure things out a little bit on our own, and like to have that feeling of mystery. But it went on for longer than I wanted, with absolutely no hints, no clues. And I wonder if maybe some of that world building that I was craving exists in that other series. And if so, that's not necessarily a good thing, because this is not set up as a sequel series. Like, it did not say it anywhere that I saw. And if so, then, like, yeah, give us just a little bit more of that world building from the first one. But I don't know, because I have not read that first series. So it might just be that the world building is a little bit sparse in the first half of this book. But when we get the world building, I do feel like about 100 pages in, it sort of catches up to itself, and it starts feeling more like, okay, these are the mysteries I'm supposed to have. This feels right. Other than that, the big complaint I have is there were a few, and I do mean a few, like, probably I could count them on one hand, moments where the prose just lost me. Like, I literally just got confused as to what was literally going on. And they were all in moments of sudden action, and I think what had happened was the sort of introspective inside your head voice of feeling like, just having feelings, transitioning to high action. There was something missing there. Like, it just needed a moment of transition that I didn't get. And so my brain was going, wait, is this metaphor for how she's feeling? No, she's literally being thrown across the room. Okay. But that also might just be me, because prose, like, things like that are often an individual kind of thing, what works for you and what doesn't. But other than that, there is spice in this book. And it's not a huge amount, all things considered. And I'm thinking about the spice a lot right now, because there's a lot of discourse about spice on threads right now. And I know that different people consider different things, different levels of spicy. So I can tell you right up, this book has 2 sex scenes in them. Both sex scenes last more than a full page. The first one is like 5 or 6 pages-ish. The second one is like 2 to 3 pages. And it is on-page sex. You are going to know what body parts are going in where, what is being touched, who is groaning, and stuff like that. But I was honestly really impressed that the author both avoided all the scientific anatomy terms that I feel get too clinical in sex scenes, but also avoided the almost comically poetic euphemisms that a lot of romance novels are pretty famous for. Like, yeah, there are no engorged members, there are no his sex, her sex, there's no, quivering mound of maidenhood. Thank God, because I cannot take those seriously. Like, objectively, these were sex scenes that I could take seriously, and there's a lot of character, a lot of emotional growth going on within them. They are part of the plot. It's not one of those that, like, you can skip the sex scenes. I do suggest reading them, even if you're not going to be someone who's going to a book for titillation. But overall, my opinion on the spice here is I've got no complaints. It's not what I go to a book for. I was fine with it. And I love the way Ella's autism is presented in this book. Like, it feels integrated, like it's not just tacked on. It feels like it's actually an in-depth part of her character. And, like, it's not used as like a, oh, trauma, let me tell you about my autistic trauma kind of book, but it's always there. It's always part of who she is. And, like, yeah, it makes sense as part of her character. But also, the way it was handled was informative without feeling preachy or teachy. Like, there are explanations of, like, why Ella is acting the way she's acting in certain moments, what she's feeling, and what of her feelings probably does stem from the autism. And I love that. And it never once felt like someone was sitting me down and being like, okay, here's what autism is like. And there's also a non-binary character, and they don't make much of an appearance on the page. They're there for, like, one scene and then some texting, but I felt the same way about them, and honestly, I just liked them a lot as a character. They were fun. And I might be guessing on this one because it's not directly stated, but it's pretty clear to me that Eugene is somewhere in the asexual family. Like, he is attracted to Ella, definitely, but he clearly has never experienced these feelings of actual sexual attraction before, and also probably arrow on that as well. He doesn't seem to have ever experienced romantic attraction to people before, And that was one of my favorite elements of it. I really appreciated that, because I will admit, I'm an absolute sucker for a character who has never experienced sexual attraction before, then meets the perfect person and is like, oh my god, yes. And I think I already said that, but you have no idea how happy I was with that. And just as a weird little side thing, I love the fact that Eugene did have the morality of his time period, but in a way that showed you that you can have old-fashioned sensibilities without being a misogynistic prick. Like, I got the feeling that he would never tell a woman to go back to the kitchen, or be confused or intimidated by a female boss. And yes, he was protecting Ella, saving her like she was a damsel. He did a lot of the leading in different situations, but it felt like that was just their dynamic, what was natural to them, and not like the dynamic that they would expect to have with every human being ever, because that's the norm. On that note as well, oddly, I did feel like Ella was a bit of a damsel, but I liked the way she was a bit of a damsel. Like, she had moments of strengths, she had moments where she just had no fear, where she objectively should have. She had moments where she was willing to fight back and stand up and do all the things that made her feel like she was fighting alongside Eugene and not just standing behind him quivering. And it made her feel like a real character. Because, like, at least for me, the reason I don't like damsels in distress is because quite often they lose their character and end up just becoming an object to be stolen, to be traded, to be stolen back, to be protected. And Ella never felt that way. She always felt like a character, and that she was having her own battles, she was doing her own thing, and yes, she was being dragged around. And one of my favorite things about it is there are moments where she is mad at herself for being dragged around and wanting to stand up, and she finds her own ways to do it that does not just involve, you know, kicking a guy in the face, like so many strong female leads end up doing. And she just felt like she had agency and was fighting alongside him in a very different way. And I loved that. But that leads me to the last major topic I'm going to talk about. I mentioned in passing that some of Ella's actions weren't always what everyone would consider logical. And yeah, there are moments that she does things that are completely unhelpful. She's doing things that a person might look at the screen if you were watching a movie and go, oh my god, don't do that, don't go in there, don't follow that guy, don't do this. But I loved it. I mentioned way back in my review for one of the books of the Roxura, I don't remember which one, but it was one where Moon was going through a lot of trauma, and he did a lot of things that are just outright illogical. And that's because humans act illogically all the time. And I loved the fact that this book let her be illogical, and also made sure that the reader knew, like, enough about her past trauma to get, like, oh, she's acting that way out of trauma. Or, oh, that is perfectly logical if you look at it through the lens of autism. Or, like, oh, sometimes it was literally just giving us her thought process so that something that, if it was just seen on a movie screen, might seem illogical, in the book felt perfectly logical. And I love it when books do this, because this is what books do better than movies, better than TV, better than any other form of media. They give you the inner voice of the character, so they can have these characters do things that if you just saw someone doing it on the street, you'd go, oh my god, that is not making any sense. But people are more complex than just their surface actions. And in a book, you get to see those complexities. And it also really helped me like Ella. It helped me love her and want her to do well. And some of these less than logical reactions are what keep her different from just every female lead in every book. They are what give her character. And it really worked beautifully for me. Overall, I loved this book. I love this book enough that I may actually read more monster romance. Hell, I will admit, I did go ahead and put a vampire romance in my cart on Amazon. Can't afford to buy it right now, but I went ahead and put it in my cart because, yeah, I have not enjoyed a book this much since, okay, I just read a recently great book. I've read a lot of books that are great recently, so never mind. I've loved a lot of books this month. But I just love this book so much, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out, which is sometime in 2025, presuming, you know, nothing goes wrong, because I know things can go wrong, so I'm hoping it's out soon. Please?